Okay, 1 Kings chapter 18 is where we're going to be if you got a Bible. If you don't have a Bible, there's one in the back. We are also going to throw it up on the screen. If this is your first time here, that's what we do. We throw it up on the screen. I believe all of the verses that we're going to cover are also in your outline and your bulletin as well. So if you have one of those, you can follow along there. We are in the middle of a series, towards the end of it actually, of a series called Show Me the Money. The series ends next week. Okay, next week, and let me just tell you this, the message next week, the last message of the series is going to be awesome. You don't want to miss next Sunday. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. How many have been excited about the message series that we're in right now? Anybody been excited about it? No, not really, right? Because here's why. Anytime you talk about money, in church especially, it gets tense. Anytime you mention money, people get tense, and I can't see you all. Like some of you should come up here and like just look out so you can actually believe me. It's hard to see what's going on because of the lights, and so I can't see, but I can feel it. Like I can feel the daggers that you're throwing at me throughout these messages. It's hard, and so what I want to do is I want to kind of calm everybody down this morning and talk about some core values. All right, everybody in this room. It doesn't matter, like you're Christian or non-Christian, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, what your background is. Everybody in this room, individually, has a certain set of core values. Now, your core values might be different than other people's. They might be spoken, they might be unspoken, but they help guide what we do and what we don't do in life. That's what core values are. They guide our decisions that we make on a daily basis. And so I thought it would be fun this morning if I shared some of my core values, because some of my core values are going to be some of your core values as well. All right, so these are, the first couple of these are mine. All right, here we go. Number one, my first core value is toilet paper goes under, not over. Anybody else share that with me? Anybody got that? I've got a roll here this morning so you can understand. Let me start over again. It goes like this. Okay, not like this. All right, it doesn't. And the reason that it goes like this is so you can pull it down and wrap your hand around it, and then the textured stuff, the grippy stuff, is on the outside, and that's important. Some of you will understand that later. I mean, but it is. It is. Now this is not one of my wife's core values. Hers is more that I believe it goes this way. And so we actually have a bathroom in our house. We have lots of bathrooms in our house. There's no bathrooms outside of our house. Jaira seems to think there are, but there are not really. And we have some where there are two rolls, and there's one like this, which is the incorrect devil way, and there's one like this, which is the correct way that you're supposed to do it. And so that's important. And listen. Sometimes, like, I've gone into people's houses before, and it's been wrong, and I flipped it over, and I fixed it for you because I want you to follow Jesus with all of your life, and that's what you need to do. All right, second core value is this. Chevy is better than Ford, but Dodge rules them all. Yeah, see, some of you are on that, right? I mean, that's important because, like, seriously, like the Mustang, it's okay, but the Camaro, whew, and then the Hellcat. I mean, have you seen the Hellcat? Like, seriously, I talk about it all the time, and so that hasn't, like, always been a true core value, but it's something that I've grown into because of the Hellcat, right? The next one, this one's really important in my life. Dogs are greater than cats. Yeah, who's with me on that one? It's a very big core value in my life, which leads to the next one, that the devil is actually greater than cats. And so, I'm getting an email on that one. We probably should, you just go ahead and leave it up there for a little while. Let that seethe into people right there. The next one, this is not really my core value. It's one of my wives. It's one that belongs to my wife, and she kind of is working this into me, like slowly and surely it's becoming one of mine. Like it has caused some marital tension. We've been married for 16 years, and we're still working on this to try to make this mine, and it's this value right here. Dishes go in the dishwasher, not the sink. Somebody wants to clap on that because they want to like shout amen and agree because that's like something that you've got too. See, here's what I don't understand about this core value. For those of you who have this value, because like every time I put the dishes in the dishwasher, my wife rearranges them because I put them in there wrong. Right? But here's the thing. She's informed me it doesn't matter. It's the thought that counts. And I just don't understand that, because I don't understand women and what they're thinking. You'll never understand guys, women, and what they think. Anyway, it's not a relationship message. But see, we have, all of us have core values, and we all have these things that drive us, and they're a lot of fun, and we could talk about them all morning, and we can laugh, and we can agree or disagree or whatever. But this next core value that I'm going to share with you is the thing that drives me. And when I say that this is the thing that drives me, the reason I want you to know this is because, I'm a pastor, and people have asked me before, and they don't understand me, and they don't understand why I do this, and I don't blame people for asking this question. But they say, what is it that motivates you? Why do you do what you do? What gets you up in the morning? Or why do you do this? Or why do you say that? Or why do you put up with this? Why do you do what you do? And I have one real core value that truly drives me. And it doesn't just drive me, it doesn't drive me for popularity or fame or ego or money or anything like that. This core value that I'm about to share with you is something I believe if you were to cut me open, and please don't do that, but if you were to cut me open and take my heart and kind of slice my heart, I believe a core value that you'd pull out of there. This is the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. This is the thing that drives me all week long. And it's going to be the thing that drives me until the very last breath that comes out of me, and it's this. And we shared this a few weeks ago with you, and I truly believe this with all my heart. Everyone's life would be better with Jesus at the center. I believe that with everything that I am. I believe that my life, that your life, that our lives would be better if Jesus was at the center. Now, if you're here today and you're not a Christian, let me just acknowledge this. I'm glad you're here. I am incredibly pumped up that you're here. You might have walked in with questions and doubts and all that stuff, and hey, that's fine. I'm glad you showed up. But here's the one thing that I know about your life. You might not agree with it, but listen to me. This is true. Your life would be better if Jesus was at the center. And you might say, I don't know, man. My life is just not that bad right now. Let's talk about the things that you think about when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't go back to sleep. I lived 24 years of my life without Jesus. I know what you wrestle with. And here's what I know about you, whether you believe it or not right now. Your life would be better if Jesus were at the center. There are people in this room, you are Christians. You do know Jesus. You do have a relationship with Jesus. You made a decision to follow Jesus. But Jesus is not the center of your life. I mean, he's a part of your life, but he's not at the center of your life. And here's what I know about you. It would be so much better for you if Jesus were at the center. And in fact, I would go as far to say that if we would live by this concept, then all the problems that dominate the world right now that we see, they don't dominate the world anymore. We know we don't have an ISIS problem in the Middle East, right? If we live by this, we don't have it because it's not a political problem. It's a gospel problem. And if we took the gospel to the world, we don't have that problem going on. If Jesus is in the center of that, that doesn't happen. We don't have social justice issues if Jesus is at the center. We're not watching all this race crap and all this other stuff on the news if Jesus is at the center. Because if Jesus is at the center, everything is better. We don't have economic crises happening. We don't have some of the problems that we have in this world if Jesus is at the center, because everything is better. Life is better when Jesus is at the center. So that's why I would say all the time to you, if you're looking for a cause to sell your life out to, sell your life out to the gospel, because there's nothing greater in this world when it comes to the potential of change in this world than Jesus Christ being at the center of everybody's life. Nothing. Jesus being at the center, though, is not a one-time decision. It's not. It's a process, and it's a process called surrender. And listen to me. Surrender is not easy. It's not. The first church I worked in as a youth pastor was a Baptist church, which was bad enough, but not just was it a Baptist church, it was a Southern Baptist church. And at the end of every service, we would sing an invitational hymn. Some of you remember this. We would get out the hymn books, and we would turn to page 187, and we're going to sing verses 1 and 3 and 5. And I don't know why we didn't ever sing all the verses, but that was just kind of how that stuff happened. And so we would sing hymns at the end of the service as an invitation, and one of the songs that we would sing is "I Surrender All." Some of you, I remember that. I surrender all, right? All to thee, my blessed Savior, right? That was it. That's how we sang it, just like that too. I mean, it was, and we would sing it until somebody moved. Like somebody had to go forward. Like we would sing the same verses over and over and over and over again until somebody went forward. And we would sing, and so after a while, we had a system where we would just sacrifice somebody and send them forward. We'd be like, all right, Jason, this is your week. It's your week to take one for the team. Like today, you need to go forward. You need to get right with God. If not, he's not going to let us go home. Just go up there and make up a sin and get saved from it, brother. Just do it. Come on, man. Take one. And we would do that. And it was not right, but it was good. Some of us, though, we would sing that song. We would have kind of like that attitude. And we have that attitude when we come in to church today. It's like when we talk about surrender, it's not I surrender all. It's, I surrender some. I surrender some. I surrender some. But keep your hand off my wallet. Right? I surrender some. But don't touch my dating life. All to thee, my blessed Savior, I surrender some. But don't touch my internet porn addiction. Right? Don't touch my secret habit. Don't touch my prescription drug addiction. Some to Jesus I surrender. I surrender some. And you know what? That's kind of funny until you think about it. Because see, here's the deal. In most cases, God is not holding out on you. You are holding out on God. And the issue that we think is the issue really isn't the issue. The issue in our lives when it comes to surrender is this. Do we really trust Jesus? Do we really trust Jesus that he really is who he says he is? Do we really trust Jesus that he will do the things in our lives that he says that he will do? And so for everyone here, I want to give you a kind of a working definition of what surrender is. And this is what we can apply to our lives. Surrender is not when we give God something. It's when we give him everything. Write that down. Surrender is not when we give God something. It's when we give him everything. Another way to say that is what we say around here a lot. A 99% commitment to God is 1% too short. It just is. Jesus Christ, we talked about this in week number 1. If he's not Lord of all, eventually he won't be Lord at all. Jesus Christ did not come and die on a cross and give his life so he could be ranked in our top 10. He came so he could be what? First, right? He wants to be first in our lives. He did not die so he could be part of our life. He died so he could be our life. And the reason that we talk about this in a money series is because money, this issue of money, is the toughest area of a person to surrender their life to Jesus to is money. It's the absolute hardest, absolutely hands down. And that's why we keep coming back to this. And for some of you, listen, I understand. I legitimately understand it's not a money issue. You've got that under control. You're good with that, but it's another issue. It's a habit, or it's an addiction, or it's something going on in your career, or it's a dating decision. Look, it doesn't matter. This works for every area. Surrender is not when we give God something, it's when we give God everything. So, 1 Kings 18. If you haven't been here with us, I'm going to catch you up real quick. If you have been with us, it's going to be a really quick review. We've been in 1 Kings 18 the whole series. We've been talking about a guy named who? Elijah. Good. God comes in 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. He says, hey, it's not going to rain or dew. There's going to be no moisture that comes from the sky. I wish we had time to go into that this morning, but we don't. And so if you missed the last 2 weeks, go back and listen to those online. But he's like, hey, there's not going to be any type of moisture in the area for the next several years except at my word. And so Elijah went and he preached, and nobody believed him, of course, because it's like, how's this dude going to make it stop raining? But for 3 years then, in Israel, it did not rain. And we found that in 1 Kings 18. It did not rain for 3 years, which was a big deal because at that time period, the entire economy of Israel was based on what? Agriculture, right? And the thing you need in agriculture that's totally beyond your control is what? Rain, water. They depended on God for rain. They needed God to send rain. But God did not let it rain for 3 years. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what it would be like for 3 years with no rain? And so we know, because we see in 1 Kings 17 and 18, that the economy had crashed. Unemployment was at an all-time high. The government was out of control. People were dying. People were losing hope. I mean, it was crazy. It was not a good time to live in the land of Israel because God would not let it rain. And so Elijah shows up finally. He goes to Ahab. Ahab's the king of Israel. And he says, hey, man, let's do this. Why don't you go get the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah and all their followers, and Baal and Asherah represented gods that Israel had chosen to follow at the time instead of following the true God. He said, hey, why don't you get all those prophets together and all the leaders and all the people, why don't we go to Mount Carmel and let's face each other on the top of the mountain. Let's go up to Mount Carmel and let's have a showdown. Let's fight. And that's what we talked about last week. That's where we ended, where Elijah got up and he said, hey, how long are you people going to waver between two opinions? How long are you going to take the world system as opposed to God's system? Because what's over here is not working out for you. These gods aren't providing for you. The one God that you've turned your face from, he will provide for you. He will love you. He will be here for you. Why don't you come back to him? How long are you going to waver between two opinions? And the people said nothing. Right? We talked about indecisive people, and we talked about getting behind them in line at Taco Bell. Drives us crazy, right? And at the end of the message last week, we left it with the prophets of Baal dancing around the altar. And they danced all night and all evening. And the people cut themselves. And Baal did not answer. Now here's what's crazy about that we didn't get into last week. This showdown gave Baal what would appear on the outside to have the upper hand. Because every time you see Baal depicted in ancient pictures and stuff about him, he's always holding a lightning bolt. They thought Baal controlled the weather. So it would have, if Baal could have done anything at all, he could have started a fire. If dude walks in with a lightning bolt in his hand, my money is on that guy to start a fire every single time, right? You ever met that guy? You ever met lightning bolt guy? Hey, how you doing? Shut up! And he just starts you on fire. That would be impressive, right? I mean, that would be cool. My money is on that guy every time to start a fire. But Baal couldn't start the fire, which also shows us, as we said last week, that the world has nothing that can satisfy us. Absolutely nothing. You want an example? The iPhone. The iPhone 1. The iPhone 2. The iPhone 3. The iPhone 4, the iPhone 5, the iPhone 5C, the iPhone 5CS, the iPhone DFGHI, whatever, right? I mean, it's only going to temporarily satisfy you. And just to be fair, for all of you who support terrorism and have an iPhone, the Samsung or the Android has the same thing. I'm on number 7, okay? And so I've gone from 1 all the way through 7. I'm guilty too. And here's the point. Surrender is not an easy process. I'm not saying that. I'm not even saying I want to be surrendered. What? You're the pastor. How could you say that? I'm telling you, man. There are days, just to be completely honest with you, there are days that I don't want to be surrendered to Jesus. But here's what I know about everybody's life, that it would be better, including mine, if Jesus were at the center. So, with that, before we go on, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. It's like a pop quiz. And here's what's cool. I'm going to give you the answer to all 3 questions before I ask them. And it's not Jesus, all right? The answer to all these is the same. It's the same word, so I'm not trying to trick you. I just think it would be cool, and I love you a whole lot, and I want you to get all these things right. All right? So 3 questions. And the answer to all 3 questions is the word water. All right? When I ask you these questions, I'm going to count to 3. At the end of the question, I want you to say water out loud. So what's the word? All right, very important you do this, because we're talking about water for the next several minutes. All right, here's the first question. During this time, when this story took place in the nation of Israel, what were the people most desperate for? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Water. There you go. All right, you got it. That's good. That's how we're going to do the next 2 also. They're desperate for water. They were most desperate for water. They didn't just want water. They didn't think water was a nice idea. They didn't say, you know what, if we could work some water into our life every once in a while, that would just be flipping awesome. They got to a point where they were desperate for water. And God brought them to this point of desperation so that he could show them who he is and what he's capable of. And what I've realized in my lifetime, and maybe you've realized this too, but in my life, as I look back over my past, when I've been most desperate in regards to an area of my life, that time of desperation was not necessarily God's curse in my life. It was God's blessing in my life, because he was reminding me, hey, Ryan, you can't do life without me. And I could do things with you, and I could do things for you, and I could do things through you that you're not capable of doing on your own. And so desperation is not always a curse. Sometimes it's a blessing. But did you know that you can come to church and not be desperate for God? Did you know we can read our Bibles and not be desperate for God? We can pray and not be desperate for God. We could come in and we could sing worship songs and not be desperate for God. I've seen people on Facebook and tweeting while they worship. How weird is that? People checking in at Central Church and getting my worship on. I don't know. Like, what is that? What is that? Like when you come and you're not focused on God. Like I saw this when I was on a youth camp thing, whatever, conference that we were at, CIY, a couple weeks ago. And it reminded me of stuff. I don't really see it in this church a whole lot because you must not love each other or whatever. But cuddle worshipers. You ever see cuddle worshipers? What the heck is that, man? Do you know what that is? It's like the couple that can't take their hands off each other during the worship song. You ever seen that? I surrender all. And you got your hand on her what? That's not desperate for God. That's desperate to get out of the service so you can get home. And so that's another message for another time. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, right? And I want to say this before I move on. We talk about desperation. I feel like there's somebody here today, maybe a bunch of people. You've been desperate for God this week. Like there's a situation going on in your life. Maybe it's relational. Maybe it's emotional. Maybe it's financial. And you've cried out and you've wondered, does God even hear me? Like, does God even care about me? And I would say, isn't it coincidental that you're in a church today hearing that there's a God who loves you and cares about you and has walked with you through that and is doing things in your life right now that you're completely unaware of, but one day you will benefit from, because God always hears the cry of desperate people. Always hears the cry of desperate people. So that's number one. Number two, second question is, what was the most valuable commodity in the entire land of Israel during this time? 1, 2, 3. Water. Very good, man. You guys are right on this. Give yourselves a hand. Go ahead. No, don't do that. Most valuable commodity in all the land was water. It was more valuable than gold. It was more valuable than silver. It was more valuable than land. You know why? Because water was the source of life. Still today in the Middle East, it's the source of life. You have no water, you have no life. You have water, you have life. Isn't it funny that Jesus said, I am the living water, so I'm the source of life? No Jesus, no life, and all that other stuff. I'm pretty sure it's incredibly coincidental. I don't know. But anyway, that's the second question. Third question is this. If you go to if you're going to go on a trip to 2,500 years ago in the Middle East, the trip's going to take you between 1 day and 1 week, and you're going to have to walk the entire trip. What's the one thing that you would not leave home without? 1, 2, 3. Water, right? You would not leave home without water. 2,500 years ago in the Middle East, it wasn't like it is today. Like today, a lot of people don't go on trips. If you look at the trips, they're the cheapest to go in like June and July. You know why? You know why most people don't go in June and July to Israel? Because it's freaking hot. Like hell would be a relief from the Middle East right now, right? I mean, because you're just pouring sweat. And so it's hot. And you know, like today when we get hot, we can stop off at Casey's or the convenience store, right? And we can get a bottle of water. It's no big deal. But think about this. 2,500 years ago in the Middle East, if you were going to go on a trip, I mean, you're in the middle of the desert, you're going to go on a trip without water, it was suicide. You didn't do it. And so the people, they're going to Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel is a location in Israel. And to get there, they would have to walk for at least a day. Many of them a week. They would have had to walk to make this location. And the one thing that they would have had to take with them was water. The one thing that they were most desperate for was water. The one thing that was the most valuable to them was water. The one thing the nation of Israel needed more than anything was water. And as they're walking along, they're going to take water with them. So keep that in mind as we read this story. 1 Kings 18, verse 30. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. Because he's telling this because they tried the whole Baal thing, right? And it didn't work. And so he's like, hey, that didn't work, so come on over here to me and listen to what I have to say. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, 12 rocks. This is huge. He rebuilt this altar with rocks. And in fact, Jesus said, I will build my church on the what? On the rock. You see, it's kind of funny how the Bible agrees with the Bible. But anyway, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. Verse 32, with the stones he built an altar. There's the stones again. It appears twice. So the writer of Kings wants us to see this. He built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 shades of seed. Now, I'm just guessing that's a lot of seed. I don't know. I saw somewhere that it's multiple pounds. They included it, so we're going to say it's a lot. Verse 33, he arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Now, let's stop and let's think about this for a second. Let's say you're at this little thing, and you showed up, and you've watched all the prophets of Baal do their thing. And you're like, man, that was terrible, guys. Like, that was the worst church service I've ever seen. All right, let's go check out this Elijah guy. Like, I've heard he's got some pretty good stuff. I know his church is a little bit crazy and they're a little outside of the box, but I hear he's getting ready to preach. And so let's go over and let's check him out. And he gets up there, and Elijah gets up, and he starts preaching, and he's doing this whole thing, and he asks for the water, and he takes the water, and he pours it. Now, you're going to lose your mind, right? I mean, somebody's going to come up to you and say, hey, dude, you got to go, after the service, you're going to have to go talk to this guy. And so you go up to him, you pull him aside, you say, hey, listen, man, I don't know if you're from around here. Like, you're probably not from around here. Elijah, you from around here? I mean, I've not seen you before, but I've heard about you. But, I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a water shortage. It hasn't rained in like 3 years, and water's pretty valuable to us. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of it, but we do have, we want to hold on to. I mean, it's a source of life. And so we've been meeting and praying about it. We don't really agree with what you just did with the water. And in fact, the word that some guy over there used was moron. I didn't say it. I'm just passing it along that you're a moron. None of us really think that you're very smart because we all want the water. Elijah, we all need the water. We could probably die without the water. We're really going to appreciate it if you wouldn't do the whole water thing again. If you didn't do that, that would be all right. But look what he does in the next verse. Look what Elijah says. Do it again, he said. Can you imagine that? Do it again. Like, I don't, you're not going to fix us, sir. Like, come on, do it again. Hey, guys, he wants us to do it again. I don't think he gets it. Do it again. All right, fine, we'll do it again. And they did it again. And he did it again. Do it a third time, he said. This is where you go, I'm not coming back. Like, I am not coming back to this church. I'm not coming back to hear this guy. I will not come back into this building. These people are crazy. They're taking everything. All they want is my water. They did it the third time. Verse 35, the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. Now, if you're watching from the outside, don't you think, man, that's such a waste. The way that he is spending the water is such a waste. And in fact, this is how I think, and it's a little warped, but if I'm in the crowd and I'm looking at the water trench, I'm trying to figure out how, when Elijah turns his back, how I can get some of that. Like, it's filled in water. Like, I'm going to take my bottle, I'm going to go fill that up, and I need that. I'm going to get close to that water, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. But here's the thing. For years and years and years and years, here's what you need to know about me. I know that I am not the smartest person in the world, but I do know a decent amount about the Bible. I don't know everything there is to know about the Bible, but I do know a very good amount about the Bible. But for years, this confused me. And this was my question when I first started reading the Bible. It was, I would read this and I'd be like, where'd that water come from? Like, God, I believe your word is true. Like, I believe everything in it. But where did water come from? Like, you ever read the Bible and something bothered you didn't understand it? This bothered me for years. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's great, God, but where did the water come from? And then, like, about 10 years ago, honestly, I got it cleared up a little bit because I heard a preacher say that from the top of Mount Carmel, you can actually see the Mediterranean Sea. And so if you can see it, that means it's close. which is not true because you can see the moon and it's not close, right? And so automatically he lost some credibility with me. But he said probably what they did is they probably sent somebody down to the Mediterranean Sea, got the water from the Mediterranean Sea, and they brought it over. Well, I believed that until I had read some commentaries that said, well, it's true that you can see the Mediterranean Sea. It's also true that it would have taken about a day to send somebody there one time and to come back. And they had dug these big trenches and they had filled them up with all this water. So it would have taken about 3 days for these verses to happen. And if that would have happened, if it would have happened that way, surely that would have been mentioned in the text. And so I don't believe that's where they got the water. And so I'm like, that theory got completely blown up. There is a theory that the water came from, I got a map here of what Mount Carmel, where it's at. See over to the right. There's a theory that they went down from the top of Mount Carmel, and they went to the Kishron River, which is down there, and they got water from there. So down at the bottom of this valley, there's this river running through it. It's more like a creek today, if you look at actual pictures of it. And so we would assume that they got their water from down there in the river. But I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense because it hasn't rained for like 3 years and there's not water running down there. And also the Bible says in 1 Kings 18 that they were out looking for water. And if there had been water down there in that valley, they wouldn't have been up on the mountain looking for water. They were desperate for water. Remember that. They were desperate. And so if they needed the water, they would have been down in the valley where the water was. And so the Kishon River, while it was there, more than likely it was dry, so the water wasn't there. And so I had been confused about this for years and years and years. And then back in October, when we were going to preach this series, I was going through some stuff, and I read this commentary, and it was talking about where they got the water from. And it said this, and this makes so much sense. It says, as Americans, we don't understand where the water came from because in American culture, this does not have the same significance it does in the Hebrew culture. It goes on, it says, the number one thing that we need to understand is for a Jewish person in this culture, 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, for a Jewish person to take water, which was their source of life, their most valuable thing to them, and pour the water on the rock, that would have been an extreme act of worship because they didn't know where the water was coming from. They didn't know when it was going to rain. They didn't know when it was going to rain. They didn't know when it wasn't going to rain. They didn't know when they were going to come into a time of feast. They didn't know when they were going to come into a time of famine. So for a Jewish person to take what was most valuable to them, water, and pour it upon a rock was an extreme act of worship. It talked about they brought the water with them. They brought the water with them on the journey. And listen, this was a demonstration of complete surrender to God, because when the people did that, they weren't just saying, I surrender all. They were showing, I surrender all. And there's a huge difference between saying it, and there's a huge difference between saying it and showing it. And when the people poured the water on the rock, it was an act of surrender, because they were taking what was most valuable and tangibly saying, God, I love you. It goes on to say the second thing you need to understand is Elijah got the water from the people. There wasn't a well, there wasn't a river, they couldn't have gone to the Mediterranean Sea, but everybody on that mountain would have had to hike or come or travel at least a day, minimum a day, max a week to get there. All of them would have had water with them. And so when Elijah was challenging these people, the reason he did it 3 times is because he had to call for commitment 3 times. Because most people don't commit the first time. They just don't. And so basically what he's saying is, hey guys, you've tried Baal. You see Baal doesn't work. Like, you've tried the system of the world. The system of the world is not working for you. So why don't you surrender to God? And there was a group of people that came forward and surrendered to God. But there were 2 groups that stood back. And after the first group, he said, hey, you know what? I'm unapologetically going to tell you, you're holding out on God. You need to come forward and you need to pour out your offering right now. And a few more people moved. But then there's always that one group. I call them the hell no, we won't go group, right? They're in every church. They are. That's their attitude. And so one more time, unapologetically, Elijah got up in front of them and said, hey, you need to get this right. You have not followed God in this area of your life, and it has left you dry. It has left you desperate, and you need to surrender. And the third group came forward, and they poured their water on the rock. So what is the significance of that today? It's very simple. Everybody's life would be better with Jesus at the center. And just like they held water as their source of life in the Middle East 2,500 years ago, I think we could all safely say and agree with this, that in America today we hold money as our source of life. And money is the number one area that people will not surrender. And as your pastor, I will unapologetically tell you that until you surrender your finances to Jesus, and until you do it, you are not surrendered. You know what, man, we can have all kinds of conversations, all kinds of dialogues, all kinds of sermons. We can argue and disagree, but at the end of the day, what's the motive of your heart when it comes to money? And once again, it might not be money. It might be dating. Like some of you are dating somebody or thinking about dating somebody you have no business with. Some of you are married and you're starting to flirt with somebody. You have no business doing that. Some of you are in a career. You don't need to be in that career, whatever. I'm just saying, what is it that you value the most? And could you take that and could you pour it out and give it to Jesus? Because that's what surrender is. Let me show you what happens when desperate people get together. Verse 36. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. I want to stop real quick and say, what did Elijah pray? What did the nation need more than anything else in the world? They needed water, right? And he didn't pray for water. He just prayed, God, let them know that you're God. God, show them that you are God. Have you ever noticed this? Like, I haven't seen this for the longest time, and so if you're just now seeing it, don't feel bad, because I didn't see it for a long time. He didn't pray for rain. He prayed for God's power. And look at this, verse 37. Answer me, O Lord. Oh, Lord, answer me. He's getting a little pushy with God right here. He wants God to answer him. So answer me so these people will know that you are God, and you are turning their hearts back again. Verse 38 says, Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. So the guy that's over there trying to steal water from the trench, he's like, dang, it was all burnt. I don't know. But that verse, though, is always confusing me because, once again, we talked about this last week. If the land is dry, what's the last thing you want falling from the sky onto the dry land? Fire, right? Fire. I remember as a kid one time growing up in Ohio, there was a drought in our area, and my dad had gone out and bought a great big huge box of fireworks, and he was going to light off fireworks in our front yard, and he had this thing, it's called a Saturn missile battery pack, and he put that thing down, and something happened when he ran away from it, but it fell over on its side, and those little things, there's like 30 of them in there, they started shooting all over the place, and a couple of them landed in the box of all of the other fireworks and caught it on fire, and it was the greatest grand finale of all time, except for fireworks were shooting all over the place at us. They were hitting us. My sister's hair caught on fire. It was the greatest thing ever. I wish YouTube would have existed. I would have filmed the whole thing because it was awesome. It was crazy. But listen, when the land is dry, you don't need fire. But look at this. But the people, see, it got their attention when this happened. But the people, when all the people saw this, they fell prostrate. I got to be careful there because I've said prostate before, right? And when you have prostate falling from the sky, you got problems, right? I've messed that up in church before, haven't you? Oh, hail the power of Jesus' name, let angel prostate fall. Some of you get that later. If you don't understand what a prostate is, come by to church tomorrow, Darren will show you. Or no, don't show anybody. You can talk them through it. Anyway. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate, and they cried, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And everybody stopped right there and was like, isn't that a miracle? And I would say, that's not a miracle because that's not what they needed. They didn't need fire, right? They didn't need fire. They needed rain. But see, what happened right here is God demonstrated His power. Skip down to verse 41. Elijah said to Ahab, I love this, go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. Now, if you're standing there in this scene in the Bible, number one, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. We're going to see that in just a few minutes. The sky was clear. Wasn't a cloud in the sky. But here you have Elijah telling Ahab basically, hey, dude, hold on to your hat because the best is yet to come. You ain't seen nothing yet. And I see right here Elijah believing in a God that could do immeasurably more than he could have ever asked for or imagined. See, he's telling a pagan king who had turned from God. He said, hey, you know what? In spite of the fact that you've walked away from God, in spite of the fact that you've led an entire nation away from God, God is about to pour out rain on the land. And rain and grace pretty much almost always mean the same thing, Hebrew. So what the people wanted was rain, but what they saw was the power of God fall. And that was absolutely incredible, because what they wanted, what they were most desperate for was water. What they most desperate for was God's grace to fall on them. And when they saw God's power, it allowed God's grace to fall. And so Elijah's telling Ahab, hey, don't lose hope. Don't lose hope because you see the fire, the dry land, everything getting burning up, because the best is yet to come. It's coming. And I want to tell somebody here today, don't lose hope. Don't lose hope because you're dry, because you're desperate, because you feel like this week, as I mentioned earlier, you've been forgotten about and abandoned. I'm telling you, when a person decides to surrender to Jesus, like Jesus might not make it right immediately, but he'll make it right eventually, because everybody's life is better with Jesus at the center. Hold on to your hat, because, man, when you surrender, you'll see it. And the best is always yet to come in Jesus. Look at this, verse 42. So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. He's got the posture of surrender right here. Watch this next verse. I love this. Verse 43. Go and look toward the sea, he told his servant, and he went up and looked. There's nothing here. I think he was cocky when he came back and told him that. And 7 times Elijah said, go back. Hold on. How would you have liked to have been Elijah's servant? You think you got it bad in your job. He's praying, and he's, hey, go look again. And the guy comes back. There's nothing there. Go back. There's still nothing there, dude. Go back again. There's still nothing back. Go back. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to tell you, whoa, 7 times. 7 times. Don't miss this. Elijah had to say about a 2-verse prayer for the fire to fall. It took a lot more time for the rain to fall. And here's the thing with us, is we love to see God's power, but what we need is God's grace. And I think one of the problems in the church over the past 2 decades in America is we've been praying over and over and over again for fire to fall when we actually need to see the rain fall. Because if the grace of God fell on our land, people would believe in the power of God like never before. The power of God is in the grace of God. Don't miss that. Write that down, because that's good. The power of God is in the grace of God. But the grace of God is a harder concept to grasp and understand. And we see Elijah begging God for rain instead of wanting to show himself in power. How awesome is that? Look at this. It goes on to say in verse 44, the 7th time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. So Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Verse 45, meanwhile the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and a heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. Let me ask you a quick question. People that gave their water in the jars, you think they got their water back, yes or no? Yeah, absolutely they did. You know why? Because you can't outgive God. It's a spiritual impossibility to outgive God. The people that gave their water, they thought Elijah was crazy. They didn't get it back immediately, but they got it back eventually. And they got back more than they even gave in the first place, because that's the power and the grace of the God we serve. He doesn't want what we want for our lives. He wants what he wants for our lives. And what he wants for our lives is much greater than what we want for our lives, which is why I would recommend complete and total surrender in life, because surrender is not when we give God something, it's when we give him everything. And when he is at the center, everything is better. So let me ask you this question, and I need you to be dead honest. What's the issue in your life that you can't let go of? What's the issue in your life that's like the water? It's that thing that's the most valuable to you. You know what? It might be your dating life. It might be, I don't know, with whatever it is. When many of you, man, it's your money. And you need to make this right today. We're not taking another offering. We're not going to show you pictures to make you cry and beg you for money or anything. We're not doing that. Listen to me. You need to make this right today. Some of you, the thing that you're holding on to is bitterness and anger because somebody hurt you in your past. You're holding on to that. Unforgiveness. You won't surrender that to God. Some of you, maybe you're holding on to an immoral habit, something you know you shouldn't be doing. You need to surrender that. Some of you, you've got an addiction. Listen, surrender is not when we give God something. It's when we give him everything. And the reason that we should surrender is because we're told in the Bible in 1 Corinthians 2:9, it says this. However, it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, things God has prepared for those who love him. In other words, we can't even conceive what God wants to do in our lives. He's not holding out on us. We're holding out on him. And the key to unlocking unbelievable things in our lives is saying, God, I surrender all. So will you do it? Will you do it?